Hello, Teacher Jack, and welcome to our little presentation about rock and roll. In this presentation, we'll be going through rock and roll as a music genre. So, such things such as history, music, style, and pioneers of rock and roll will be featured in this presentation. So, first thing first is the history of rock and roll. What is rock and roll, and how did it came to be? First, rock and roll, or rock and roll, or rock and the symbol, rock and roll. They're all the same thing, and it is a genre of worldwide popular music that emerged from the mid-1950s and expanded around the mid-1960s. The style of rock and roll music can be recounted as a combination of country music and rhythm and blues, or also known as R&B music. However, the process of rock and roll becoming popular isn't as simple as two other music genres, aka the R&B and the country music, just merging. Otherwise, we were seeing rock and roll already popular long before it exploded in popularity into the national consciousness. The music genre itself burst into national knowledge in the mid-1950s, since the foundation being the mixture of country music and R&B was already long implanted and was heavily influenced by the mix of black culture and the white people spending their power. There's also black vocal groups that combine gospel and call and response with earthy subject matter and aggressive R&B, and this sound would later be paved the way by DJs or disc jockeys. And one particular case that is worth mentioning is that the case of William Hoss Allen, who created a rock and roll radio by using intense R&B with spicy blue records that introduced white teens to a more thrilling and exciting culture of music. And in 1954, this newly founded rock and roll would be merged with a good-looking white singer that sounded like a black man. This man is named Elvis Presley, or otherwise known as the King of Rock and Roll.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Well, they said you was high class, well, that was just a lie. Yeah, they said you was high class, well, that was just a lie. Yeah, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine.
And that is a basic history of how rock and roll came to be as a music genre. Now we are moving on to Xiang, who would talk about the music style of rock. Thank you.
And now, I'm going to talk to you about the musical styles of rock and roll, which are separated into three major parts: how we play it, how it feels, the instruments and layout. Let's start off with how it plays. How it plays. Rock and roll music will have the guitarists, bassists, and drummers to be the opening scene of the song, which then followed by stories of heavy metal music throughout the song. And then there will be the lead singer ready to sing the song. Rock and roll music includes electrical instruments, acoustic instruments, and heavy metal music background as tunes. Any one of them appears will turn them into a rock and roll track. Now, the following narration here will lean onto the heavy metal aspect. How it sounds. Rock and roll music has three main aspects, which are influential, rebellious, and encouraging. Let's take an example from Bon Jovi, It's My Life song.
It's my life, it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live my life. It's my life. My heart is like an open highway. Like Franklin said, I did it my way. I just wanna live my life. It's
From the hook sentence of "It's my life and it's now or never," we can mark three things. 1. It's rebelling against their parents' expectation and goal. 2. A fun song to jam while listening to. And 3. Encouraging you to pursue your goals and dreams. This makes rock and roll unique because of its heavy metal rock that makes it fun to listen and has freedom in speech inside the music. And finally, a band's layout and instruments. A band will always have a lead singer to be a part of the band. They will usually follow the 4 basic configurations of the band, which are guitarist, vocal guitarist, bassist, and drummer. Without these 4, they will have a hard time performing either heavy metal music background if lack the guitarist, and drum tempo if they lack drummers. Tempo here means the speed of the music. Back then in the 1950s, there were a minimal amount of instruments to use, which list of them are electrical guitars, a drum kit, and a bass. In 2000, however, there's a lot of them, which an example are acoustic guitars, electric pianos, electric gears, electric organs, cymbals, drum kits, pianos, bass, guitars, and electrical keyboards, which most of them are actually electrical. And now I'm going to hand the Pioneer section for Glock. Thank you.
Next, we will move on to pioneers of rock and roll. It all started in the 1950s, where genre became more famous to the world. Rock and roll is a combination of rhythm, blues, and country. We will start with what most people consider the father of rock and roll, Chuck Berry. Born in 1926 in St. Louis, Missouri, he exposed himself to music at the age of 6 at church choir and started to cross music boundaries no one ever dared cross, resulted in him creating a new genre that we all know today as rock and roll. We can see by his song Johnny B. Good how he made a song that is so authentic at the time people didn't expect much about it. That resulted in his success in the music industry. Next up is a man who is called the King of Rock. It is Elvis Presley. Born in Tupelo, Mississippi, he started growing interest in music when he got his first guitar at 11 years old at his birthday party, and his career began to go uphill ever since, with him creating a unique style that no one had ever perceived. He became famous with his first hit, Heartbreak Hotel, and started acting as another job. But his career was eventually brought to a halt because of America's government drafted him into the army for the Cold War. When finished, he resumed his career and became one of the most dominant rock and roll artists out there. He had created many songs and each one is unique from the other. Take Can't Help Falling in Love, for example, where he expresses his love into an emotional song that is one of his top hits.
Wise men say only fools pray. I am falling in love with you.
The last one is Little Richard. Born in Macon, Georgia in 1932 as the third child of 12, he was influenced a lot by the church and helped him sing and play the piano. He later became the frontman for a group of musicians in New Orleans and created some of his most notable songs, such as Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, and Good Golly Miss Molly. But his rock career is cut short due to his link to the church and because he is a religious man. He gave up the career of rock and roll and instead started creating songs about religion and gossips. We can see by the song Tutti Frutti how he became a natural and stood out are musicians by his movement and his style when performing live in front of other people. Next, we will move on to Amon, who will be talking about the importance of rock and roll.
Thank you, Gra. Now I will be talking about the importance of rock and roll. Rock and roll were created as a sign of a revolution for the development of the youth. It started with combining culture from different races into a cultural blend. This has changed the new generation in the 50s to rebel against the older generation and do something different. The British rock band also impact American rock and roll because of their culture and appearance. For example, the Beatles. Their music became popular in America, and when the Americans saw their appearance, such as their hairstyle, as a sign of rebellion. Speaking of the Beatles, one of their songs, All You Need Is Love, became an anthem to the hippie movement. In the 80s, the influence of rock and roll reached punk, resulting in groups dressing up weirdly and don't want to fit into society. All of this happened because of the popularity of punk. It also introduced new key features to rock and roll, such as distorted guitar and fast rhythmic bass. This made way for popular bands that emerged in the 80s and 90s, such as Nirvana as a grunge group and Green Day as a band that teenagers listened to a lot. So, rock and roll became one of the most important genres because of its significance to cultural value. If we didn't have rock and roll, the world would be a different place than what we see today. We hope that this presentation helps you understand rock and roll more, and remember to rock on!